there might be a process back and forth of which shots are going to go into the next trailer.
Okay.
Based on our post-production schedule and what visual effects can finish.
Right.
So certain shots are trailer shots.
Okay.
So they may not be actually in the movie.
That's so cool.
So that happens quite often.
I'm learning so much. Welcome to Media in the Mix, the only podcast produced and hosted by the School of Communication at American University. Join us as we create a safe space to explore topics and communication at the intersection of social justice, tech, innovation, and pop culture. Today, we welcome Anedra Edwards, SOC alum, special effects expert, just everything video editing and more. So, Anedra, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
No problem. I'm glad to be here, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Of course. Thank you. So, we're going to get right into it. First of all, can you tell our audience what year you graduated and what degree that you graduated with?
I graduated American University in 2015 with my Master of Fine Arts in Film and Electronic Media.
Awesome. And fun fact, I think we were in the same graduation ceremony because I graduated undergrad 2015 SOC. So that's pretty cool. Just actually a quick follow-up to that. How does it feel being back on campus? Have things changed? Is it really cool to see how SOC is kind of upgraded in the last few years?
Yeah, it's really fun to be here and to be well, we're still kind of in the pandemic. We're just not in the global emergency portion of it, but it's good to see that the school is back into a routine of students being on campus and just to see the buildings and what's changed in them. There's been little tweaks here and there that I noticed that were different while I was here, but I'm glad to see a lot of the different upgrades the school has taken care of.
It's been very cool. And actually this year is our first in-person everything, really. So like our graduation ceremony, it was the first in-person back since the pandemic. So it is good to see kind of the students getting back out there. It was nice to see as a staff member. But anyway, let's get right into it. So I want to ask you the important question first, which is, was there like a specific program or class or professor you had that you felt like set you up for where you're going to be? How do you feel like SOC got you to where you are today?
Well, I like the variety of programs that existed at SOC at AU, and that's why I came here as a student, because of the variety of what I would get in a filmmaking program. I was able to do a lot of different positions. I was going to get a holistic style of a film program where I would be producer, director, gaffer, editor, multimedia, not just scripted short films or things like that. So I like that it was such a well-rounded program, so that's why I chose it as a student. And also I really enjoyed some of the bare bones boot camp style classes I took in my editing software, and I use that software today, which is Avid Media Composer. And so I did a lot of my short films using Avid, and also like my final thesis film, I used Avid on that just because I knew where I wanted to go. I needed to really have a grip on that software.
And just so we can clarify a little bit for anyone listening. So you're working out in LA now, and is Avid a huge editing software that is used out there? Is it, beneficial to know that if you're planning to go edit out in LA?
Yes, Avid is still a big player, definitely in big feature films. But you can also, to me, be well-rounded in a lot of variety of programs. That's totally normal as well. There are a lot of people who are more well-versed in Premiere, who might be more DaVinci Resolve. There are tons of post-production roles that will use the variety of programs.
Okay.
Avid is used primarily in the cutting room for the initial portions of editing.
Okay.
So it's a big program to be aware of, and you kind of make yourself a bit versatile to know that program because tons of studios and content use it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wasn't aware that there were that many softwares until I went and did some work in New York, and they were like, we use DaVinci. And I was like, oh, so it is kind of beneficial to just make yourself aware of the other softwares, know how to use it, know a bit about it. And then a follow-up question to that. Did you do any experiential learning programs while you were here at AU?
Yes, I did several programs. So while I was here, I did the Prague program, which we go to the Film and Television Academy of the Czech Republic in Prague. And so I did that program, which AU participates in through an international education program. I also did the experiential learning program that took us to Alaska.
Awesome.
So that was through the Center for Environmental Filmmaking. So I did that program, which you go for about 2 weeks, maybe a little over. And you are at the time, we were in Seward, Alaska. And that was a really cool program to do and to learn how to film in the wild, essentially.
Right. And I think that's called Classroom in the Wild, correct? Yeah. Yes, that's it. Awesome. And in terms of the studying abroad in Prague, did you feel like, studying abroad in a different country, meeting new people, learning about a new culture, do you feel like that kind of elevated your film knowledge in general?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that style of learning. It was more of an observatory style of school. So you were kind of what they say, eat, breathe, and live in film. And it was really great to have professors that you're not necessarily getting the American Hollywood style of filmmaking. You were actually able to try different styles.
That's
and
cool. Yeah.
while I was there, I took some of my animation courses. So you got to learn about other styles of animation that maybe I wasn't necessarily going to get over here. So it was really interesting to do that.
Awesome. Did you always know it was going to be editing? Like when you came to get your master's where you're like, I'm doing this because I know I want to be an editor? Or did you kind of have like a little bit of a different path?
I think I always knew editing, but I came to just keep my mind open as well.
Yeah.
Prior to coming to AU, I was already working in the field. I was working in news. And so I was a promotions producer and editor. And that really gave me great experience into what it was in terms of a consistent editing job.
Yeah.
Where I was, at the time, I was writing copy for news promos, but also editing our TV spots that were like 15 to 30 seconds.
Okay.
And so it really was a great experience there. But I knew that news wasn't necessarily the only genre I wanted to be in. And so I used AU as a springboard to try other genres, other areas of film and media so that I could get an idea of what I wanted to do. But editing really did draw me.
That's awesome.
Towards it.
And then a follow-up to that. So can you just, for anyone who maybe wants to work in one or the other, can you give us like your best type of summary on kind of the difference you'd feel as an editor working in a newsroom versus, feature film or blockbusters or that kind of like long-term project?
Yeah, definitely. So the cutting room in a newsroom is a bit different. And being a producer editor, that's usually like a combination role that happens quite often in news, where you're kind of a multi-hyphenate and you might be a producer, also editing your own spots, and you're also writing copy as well within news. You might also be having some coordinator tasks as well, producing some shoots. There are times where I even shot a couple things that I would then cut.
Fun.
So yes, you have a lot of different tasks associated with what your role might be in news, versus if you take going into feature films, especially big feature with large studios, a lot of the positions are segmented.
Right.
So there's a specific position for each thing, each task. So you can have multiple assistants in that role. So in feature films, in addition to the editor, there might be a first and second assistant editor.
Okay.
So you have several of those. And for me as well in visual effects, as a visual effects editor, I might have a supervising visual effects editor. I might have an assistant visual effects editor.
Gotcha.
So there's several like different roles within that.
Okay.
Much more segmented. So not to say that news can't prepare you for that. Obviously, I went from news and am now where I am. But it gives you a good sense, I think, in news, the fast-paced cutting room that you might have there. You're definitely moving very quickly.
That's awesome. And so basically a lot of overlapping skills that you could use for sure. Okay, I love that. And then let's get more into visual effects and kind of the editing world. Is there, I guess, any misconceptions first and foremost about visual effects and kind of just the editing world? Any of them you want to squash maybe?
Well, visual effects is very layered. There's lots of positions in it, and there's lots of different types and programs for what you may be doing with that. So that gives a testament to a lot of the scrolling credits that people will see where there's hundreds of names in these bigger films. That's because there are like a lot of different roles. So for me, when I describe my position as a visual effects editor, I always say that I'm on the production side, which means I'm directly associated with the film or TV show.
Okay.
A lot of times for visual effects, we actually farm out the work to visual effects studios.
Okay.
So those are going to be your big companies like ILM, which is Industrial Light and Magic. You have Weta FX, which is based in New Zealand. So you have those larger visual effects studios that will have a set of positions on their end.
Okay.
So that's kind of a big difference that people may not see all the time. So I work with the entire film or the entire TV series as a whole.
Okay.
So I deal with all the shots that come and go, that get cut into the movie or get cut into the TV show. I make sure they line up. I make sure that they are what I actually sent the artists from the visual effects company, make sure they match. And then any of the updates that happen along the way, I have to make sure there's continuity between them. So there's a lot of overallness that I do as a visual effects editor on that end. And so I think some of the misconceptions that people may have is understanding the difference between an artist and an editor in visual effects. An artist is going to be specific to that shot that I gave them. They may not see the entire scene. They may only see like a series of shots, whatever I need them to see. You know, so an artist is going to dive deep into the whole of programs for visual effects. You might have Nuke Studio, which is a program they'll use, Houdini. You'll see Unreal Engine, those software programs. So that's a lot of what an artist is going to do. And then artists can get very specific. They have definitely different departments for compositing. That are going to be much more specific than I am as a visual effects editor. So that's probably like, you know, you could go even deeper, but that's like a big kind of icing on the top of what the misconceptions or differences are.
That actually made it more clear for me, I think, because you just made the credits that I see make sense. You know what I mean? Because you kind of do always see those like collaboration with sometimes. And I'm like, I wonder where those people are stationed. Are they outsourced? Are they people that you may work with in different countries? So that's very interesting to hear, actually. That's really, really cool. And then follow-up question, is there, you know, let's say we have a student right now listening or someone who's about to graduate, what's one thing you feel like they need to know prior to going into an editing career?
I think as students who are watching this who are in the DC area, that you can apply certain skills already now. Learning how to network. Definitely in the DC area, you can apply those same skills if you want to go to Los Angeles or another big city outside of DC. That you can start those skills here. And that's a lot of what I did. I learned how to build my network here in the DC area. There are tons of organizations that you can take part in. A big one that I recommend to students is that we have a very active chapter, a part of the Television Academy here in the DC area. You have the Chesapeake Bay chapter. They offer so many programs. They offer so many like different opportunities that students take part in.
That's awesome.
And AU has a lot of partnerships where students have submitted their short films for Academy recognition. There's a lot of collaboration that happens there. So I recommend for students to start building their network here. You don't have to wait till you get to Los Angeles or Atlanta or wherever you'd like to land. You don't have to wait to get there. Start learning how to pitch yourself here now.
I like that. And also, I guess for if you were to meet someone like Anedra, if you were to do the LA intensive, whether you're still based in DC or planning on moving out to LA, I feel like that's a great point because these programs that we do are connecting you to awesome AU alum that are going to have some cool tips and tricks. So listen up. So on that note, how was the LA intensive this year?
It was really great. I think they had an amazing group of students. I mean, there's always an amazing group.
I know.
They're really excited.
Talented.
Really specific questions they'll ask me. And I appreciate that because I want to give you not a shallow answer, give you as much in-depth and be transparent as possible about what the LA experience is, especially to come from out of AU, whether you move right after you graduate or you take a year or two and then move, or if you're several years out from having been in school and you decide I want to give LA a try and you do the LA intensive. I think that there's a lot that can be accomplished for students when they come to LA through the program to really see themselves there and to give it a shot in terms of thinking about where do I see my future in this industry, in this space.
That's awesome. Yeah, great advice. So on behalf of us, just a huge congratulations for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. You and your visual effects team were nominated for an Oscar. I feel like just kind of have to ask you, how did that feel? You know, just as something to add to your resume, to your career, just that moment. How did that feel getting to that point?
It was really exciting. I think it's the first production that I've been on that has had multiple Oscar nominations, and to have our visual effects supervisors, which are the ones who go up and represent us as part of the visual effects team, and they would go up and accept the award, just seeing them be nominated because they work so hard, and it really is. It is a team effort in that sense too. Like the whole visual effects department, we put a lot of effort in, a lot of long days, a lot of making sure the vision of our director is implemented as well. That we're telling a good story, and that visual effects complements the story, that's going on screen. And so it was really exciting to see the whole process, and even the nomination process, and what that actually takes, because that's a bit layered as well. You kind of just don't submit your film. There's actually a process that you go through in terms of getting it to that stage as well. So it was really like a great observation for me as well, and to just be a part of the team, and to see, to see it all go down, and then to be watching and rooting, for my team. It was really fun, and
just to see y'all's name up, it's just like, that's awesome. That's awesome. Huge congratulations. That's such a big accomplishment. And then how do you feel like, I want to try to word this in the best way I can, but what do you feel like your role is being a part of the Black Panther team? The obvious is you're a visual effects editor, but what does that mean to you? I mean, a little bit more than that, another layer to add to that.
Well, you're definitely that extra set of eyes that comes to what the effect is playing in the shot. But you're also like, we're not just asked about how visual effects play in the story. Our director would ask our opinion just in general. How's the scene playing out?
Awesome. Right.
How does it affect us? Sometimes during the early parts of pre-production for certain scenes, I would help cut with pre-visualization and previs shots, which are basically like animated versions of the story before we go and shoot it.
Right.
And so, playing a part in that to say what made sense to me, or what, seemed to work, and see if it makes it further down the line, in the cutting room. And so I really enjoyed our director, Ryan Coogler, really considering everybody having a voice on the team. So that was really refreshing, and I really enjoyed working with a creative team like that, who does care not just about what your role is, but just as a viewer, like, how does this sit for you?
That's awesome.
And definitely the woman empowerment that was within the film, and being an African American woman, watching it and being inspired by certain scenes, it was just a really fun film to work on. For that.
I love that, and that kind of answers my follow-up question. But that's so cool, because I someone was asking me the other day, like, how involved are you as a post-production person in the rest of production? Because it does make sense. You do have to understand what's happening in order for you to translate it into, well, this is how the scene then ends up looking, right? So I'm assuming you do have to be a part of that process, although maybe not heavily like you are in the writer's room or this, but you do have to understand somewhat of how this story is going to play out, so that you can take it and then turn it into what it becomes, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So for post-production, we actually run the same time as production.
Okay.
So when they start filming, which for us,
so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, fun fact. That's really cool.
Yeah, when we start filming, which for us, we started filming in Atlanta.
Okay.
And post-production was right there as well. So as certain scenes are finished filming for that day, that footage, or dailies as we call it, is sent to go get processed. The dailies,
right. Okay.
And then as soon as it's processed, it's sent right back to us.
Wow.
So our editors are cutting consistently as things are being filmed. The director wants to come and sit and see how certain stuff is being played out.
Right.
So that if he needs to change things or make adjustments, which we definitely had happen.
Wow.
And so visual effects is a part of post. So we're along the ride as well. So we're
awesome.
Taking those shots. We're getting right to work. Like I said, some of the pre-production process we're involved in, because we might be editing previs.
Right.
Or we might be, sending different quick times of those scenes to different departments, so that they can prepare and know what visual effects has in mind for how we're going to actually achieve this shot or achieve this scene. So that's kind of how post and production, we kind of run alongside each other.
Okay.
But obviously production will end. They do have an expiration date for when they finish filming.
Okay.
Including reshoots, which do happen sporadically after main photography.
Okay.
And so post-production, we're the last department. We are the last ride of the roller coaster, essentially.
That's awesome. I have a question, very curious. Although not very visual effects heavy, but how early does a trailer, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, how early does the trailer come out prior to actual post-production being completed? Does that make sense? Like, do they take from what you've created, or do you guys all almost kind of work with each other? to
Well,
get something out at the same time?
Well, we do work with each other. So
Okay.
in my case for visual effects, we have a marketing coordinator.
Okay.
And so that
Oh, wow. So they're
role, they're
marketing
responsible for
yeah.
communicating to the marketing
Okay.
team for the studio where we are with certain visual effects shots.
Wow.
And so what makes sense to go into a trailer, what makes sense to not, this is too revealing. You know, there's a whole process that happens.
Yeah.
And so every studio is different for how that might happen.
Right.
For Marvel Studios, sometimes you have a rollout that happens sometimes at Comic-Con or some other conventions that you get like a bit of a peek.
Okay,
and so
that's
for
cool.
us, our first trailer dropped at Comic-Con
Oh,
for
wow.
Wakanda Forever.
Okay.
So that was when we first showed it.
Right.
And then you continue down the line for, I guess, I can't quite remember if it's 8 months,
That's so
but
cool.
sometimes it's an 8-month campaign. Sometimes it's shorter.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have that kind of that run up to the film around then.
cool.
So Marvel Studios will tend to do that. They'll drop it at conventions or certain things.
And will Marvel ever like kind of take the feedback they get from the audience and maybe change something around if it's something they feel like, oh, this wasn't perceived the way we want it? Does that ever change then in post-production? Just curious, like to if you know ever really like play off of that.
Well, for the trailers themselves, sometimes we already have an idea how the trailers from the first to second to the third are going to play out.
Right.
So there might be a process back and forth of which shots are going to go into the next trailer based on our post-production schedule and what visual effects can finish.
Right.
So certain shots are trailer shots.
Okay.
So they may not be actually in the movie.
That's so cool.
So that happens quite often.
I'm learning so much. That's awesome. That's just questions I'm always curious about, you know? Yeah.
So that happens as well. So sometimes there's audience feedback about whether they liked something, but we might know that, okay, well, what they saw, it's actually not in the movie.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Or,
so it's like, why? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
But we do a lot of audience testing as well. That happens throughout
that was also, okay, cool. So it's kind of like in the video game verse a little bit, kind of do that where like the beta goes out and then it's like, well, how do we get that, you know?
Yeah.
What are we feeling right now? Like, let's gauge the temperature or whatever, you know?
Yeah, like audience testing, it happens quite often.
Okay.
You know, at Marvel. I actually had my one of my cousins who was in Los Angeles with me be part of one of our audience testing.
So fun. That's awesome.
And sometimes it's
That's
Disney.
cool.
Well, a lot of times it's Disney employees that are part of that audience testing.
Cool.
Not all the time, but you know, a good chunk of the time.
Yeah.
It's that, or it's other colleagues or professionals. Sometimes you might have creative teams that they want to get children's perspective or a teen perspective.
Okay.
So it all depends on the
Cool.
films, but
That's awesome.
as we finish the cuts of the film, we are doing the audience testing along the way.
Right. I love that. That's great. And then last question for you. You know, we talk a lot about inclusivity and diversity at SOC and everything, but you know, it's so different once you go out into the world, and it just looks different statistically maybe than what you're used to, like taking a program. So how do you feel like the industry, you know, as a whole, where is it now in terms of like diversity and inclusivity? And do you feel like there's anything that we can do out there to strengthen that?
It's getting better, but it's really slow.
Okay.
There's still tons of improvement that have to happen, especially within the departments that we consider are behind the iron curtain.
Okay.
There's a lot of positions and roles that are not necessarily going to be in the forefront when someone says they want to go into film, you know, and TV. So you're seeing maybe on screen there being a bit of a speedier inclusiveness than you might see behind the camera.
Okay.
It's getting there, but like in my position, quite often I'm the only Black woman or the only person of color, woman of color, sometimes the only woman on my team for a while. So there's still a lot that studios have to do to make sure that they're bringing in inclusive crew. You know, they benefit from it, not just, and we don't want to be tokens, like we don't want to be hired just because I'm a woman. I don't want to be hired just because of that, but also I want to be hired because I'm qualified for the position and I bring this unique perspective.
100%.
You know, so there's still a lot of that that's happening. And definitely in editorial, there's definitely a lot more programs that are helping to spur that. Okay. I will say that I've seen an uptick in that for sure.
That's awesome.
Especially with the pandemic, there was a lot of accessibility that could happen because Zoom was available for a lot more people. So producers and executives could actually meet crew without having to run around town and go to these events and try to meet everyone. They could actually just hop on a Zoom and we introduce ourselves, and it opened, you know, their eyes to more people and more professionals. Right.
That's great. I do agree. Sometimes we see like the long list of names, you know, on screen, but then it's like, but what about the long list of names off screen, the behind the scenes, people that are working, you know, it's, yeah, I do agree as a Middle Eastern woman too. I just recently started comedy and stand-up comedy, and that's something that's been like, wow, I'm really seeing it. Once you're, you know, you're really out there, it's like, okay, a lot less than I thought, but that's great that you're there to represent. It's like it all starts with those, you know, those people. So that's awesome. And a question, I'm not going to say last question because I forgot to ask you before. Can you just give us like a little rundown on, you know, maybe what projects are next that you can talk about? Kind of what are some things you're looking forward to?
Well, definitely I'm looking forward to the film that I just wrapped on, Transformers: Rise of the Beast, which is under Paramount Pictures, and it will release June 9th. Depending when students see this, you may see it.
I was going to say, you'll probably see this episode after it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah. So the weekend of June 9th, it premieres domestically. So I'm really excited to have that out the door. And that was a really fun production to work on because of working with alien, you know, robots and the Transformers franchise. And we're the seventh movie technically in the franchise, but we definitely took a different spin with it. I really enjoyed our director, Stephen Capel Jr. He's just awesome to work with. So I really had fun with that production.
Yeah.
And then I will likely return onto my next production in the fall. So it could be a number of studios. I've been in talks with a couple of them.
Exciting.
So, yeah.
Fingers crossed. That's great.
You.
That's awesome. So much exciting stuff. Please keep us posted. We'll definitely make sure to keep up with you as well. But Anedra, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we've had so much fun talking to you. And hopefully we can do a part 2 soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Of course. If anyone would like to listen to our other episodes of Media in the Mix, you can find us on Spotify as a video podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to donate to the School of Communication, go to giving.american.edu. Thanks so much.